Folks, it's your Canadian brother Phil here. And today I wanted to provide you with my reaction to the election results here in Canada, as well as provide you with some analysis and some predictions for the future. And we're going to do this by touching on three main topics. Number one, why did the Liberals win? Number two, what were the actual results, the good and the bad? And number three, once again, the predictions for the future and how Canadian Conservatives need to move forward. Now, the first thing I want to address is this. We as Canadians need to accept the fact that our Canadian brothers and sisters chose Mark Carney. They chose the Liberals. The election was not rigged. How do we know this? Let's just take a look at this objectively. First of all, we had the results the night of. Second of all, the Liberals would have given themselves a majority. Why would they cheat just to give themselves a minority? And number three, the Conservatives simply wouldn't have flipped all of those NDP and Liberal ridings. There's areas that were red before that are now blue. Areas like southwestern Ontario and others. The first thing is that leaves no room for any critical self-analysis about what went wrong and what could go better next time. Because if Conservatives were always supposed to win and the election was stolen from them, then what could they improve upon? It wasn't their fault. The second thing, and this is actually far worse, is that it discourages you from participating in the next election. Why would you participate in something that you believe is rigged? So that actually just accomplishes pretty much what the Liberals would want, is for people to not be involved in the election process, to go out there and to cast their votes again, because why even fight against a rigged system? Now, could there have been some funny business happening in Pierre's home riding of Carleton? I don't know. I've heard a few things about district zone changes, them adding and moving postal codes and bringing in people from prior Liberal ridings into the new Carleton area. These are things, redistribution happens within electoral districts. It's always been a feature of Canadian politics. Electoral districts change all the time. Okay, so that's not enough for me to assume that the election was rigged. It is hard to believe that the Liberals would have won a fourth term with everything that's happened. It's hard to believe with the size of Pierre's crowds, the rallies, and every blue sign we've been seeing out there. But what we need to understand is that there are a lot of Canadians over the age of 50 who voted Liberal. We don't see them. We don't exist in the same sphere. We're here online. Conservatives did better with other age groups, with Gen Z, with millennials. But with the boomers, it was a different story, and they are a more organized voting bloc. Now, this isn't about blaming one group. I'm not blaming boomers, but it is a factor. The bigger factor is the number one election issue. The number one election issue, it wasn't the economy, which it should have been. It wasn't crime, which it should have been. It wasn't immigration, which it should have been. It was Trump. And I'm not even blaming Trump at all, actually. But what I am saying is at the top of every single poll that Legacy Media was having, the number one election issue for Canadians was how to deal with Donald Trump, the threat of Donald Trump. And so Canadian Conservatives need to understand and need to be aware and admit to themselves that many Canadians did not see through this smokescreen, and they chose Mark Carney. That's just what happened. It is disappointing, yes. We wish that Canadians were more involved politically and were more aware of the issues and the dangers and globalism and all of the things that we understand to be threats. They just simply don't see that. And so things haven't gotten bad enough for Canadians yet. They haven't felt enough pain yet. But maybe they will. And we're not wishing that on them, but people need time to come to these conclusions. In the meantime, you and I both know that we're losing our country. We're losing the economy, freedoms. And so this is why we have to have red flags that we watch out for, key events that will happen, that will let us know what time it is and what we need to be doing in order to protect ourselves and our family, and to a larger extent, our country. There are many of you who are considering leaving Canada. And listen, I already got one foot outside of Canada. I'm ready to go to the States, baby. Not a problem. But before that, we got to try everything in our power to save this country to the best of our ability. Give it everything we have, watch out for the red flags, and jump ship when we need to jump ship. So let's get into some of the results. The biggest takeaway from the 2025 Canadian election is how the NDP were absolutely decimated. 71% wipeout. They went from 24 seats to 7 seats. They have lost official party status, and their leader is now gone. He resigned. He's finished. And so why is this extremely important? The NDP had a coalition government with the Liberals. The Canadian people have given the Liberals 3 back-to-back minorities. In 2015, Justin Trudeau won a majority, and since then, they've only gotten minority governments. When the Canadian people give you a minority government, it means that they don't trust you with a majority, and that they are forcing your hand to be able to work with other parties who can hold you to account and stop any bad agendas that you might have. In a minority government, if you propose a bill that gets voted down in the House of Commons, then the government collapses and you go to a federal election. What the Liberals and the NDP did was the most anti-democratic thing that has ever happened in this nation's history. And it's why so many people were upset. The media didn't give enough attention to this story, but it's absolutely true, and you can tell from the election results. They made a coalition government with the Liberals and the NDP. And that allowed them to pass all of the bills they've been passing over the past 2 to 3 years because they had this coalition, which is against what the Canadian people wanted for them. Jagmeet Singh and the NDP paid for this dearly. And so the reason why this is essential, and it's a great lesson for what happened after this election, is because now parties like the Bloc Québécois, parties like the NDP, any other party in Parliament knows now not to do another coalition government again because they will be wiped out.
I must say that the marriage between the NDP and the Liberals brought the NDP from 25 to 7. I'm not sure if I were them that I would try that another time.
And that to me was the biggest piece of good news that happened from the election. Now there's lots of bad news, and I'm not here to, fluffy things up and make things sound nice. I'm here to give you a sobering reality, a little bit of hope, and an action plan of how we need to move forward. Now that being said, in 1993, the Conservatives had only won 2 seats. They were reduced from a supermajority in the 1980s to 2 seats. Imagine if the Conservatives on Monday were reduced to 2 seats. That would be crazy. So all is not lost, and we've been in worse places before. That's the first thing I'm going to say about that. Let's just get into the sheer numbers and examine how each of the parties did just based off of the results. So as previously stated, the NDP was decimated from 24 seats to 7 seats, representing a 71% wipeout. The Green Party went from 2 seats to 1 seat. That's a 50% wipeout. The Bloc Québécois went from 35 seats to 22 seats, which is a 37% wipeout. And the Liberals went from 154 seats to 169 seats, a 9.7% increase. And finally, the Conservatives went from 128 seats to 144 seats, a 12.5% increase. Yes, the Conservatives should have won. It was very important for them to win, for reasons that we all know. But at least they didn't get wiped out. At least they turned previously held Liberal ridings Conservative. Places like southwestern Ontario.
An absolute breakthrough for the Poilievre Conservatives in southwestern Ontario. The Conservative campaign was able to punch above its weight, explains why it was able to pick up a significant number of seats in Ontario.
It's a foundation that can be built upon, especially as time goes on and things get worse, as we project that they will be. Are there some things that I think Pierre could have done a little bit better? Yes, I do. He could have been on more podcasts, been a little bit more involved in the online space, and I don't particularly think it was very helpful for him to keep giving oxygen to "we will never be the 51st state" and speaking out against Trump when it really just made him sound like the Liberals, and he should have just kept the channel on the Liberals and remind Canadians that the Liberals are trying to change the channel from their own shortcomings and how they've made Canadian lives hell and deflect into Trump. He should have kept hammering that message to remind people that that's exactly what the Liberals were trying to do. And the Liberals did a good job of doing that. And again, I'm not blaming Trump for that. And I'm not blaming Pierre for that. I'm blaming our people for not being smart enough to see through that narrative. That's who the responsibility lies with, the voters, every single time. Minority governments don't last long. They typically last anywhere from a year to 2 years. So we could very well see another election within that time frame. Now, do I think that's exactly what's going to happen? Well, what a good time for us to move into the final segment of this video, which is my predictions for the future. ProMain shows predictions for the future of Canada. I believe that at least 3 members from the NDP party, maybe 4, maybe all 7, will become Liberals, cross the floor, giving the Liberals the majority that they need to commence passing their agenda once more. Maybe it won't be NDP. Maybe it will be the one Green Party seat, Elizabeth May. Maybe it will be some people from the Bloc Québécois. But I believe that the Liberals will have additions from other parties to their seats, once again going around the will of the Canadian people. Now, even if the Liberals have their majority and they start passing the worst bills, the only thing that can stand in the Liberals' way, the last hope that we have in Canada, is Premier Danielle Smith in Alberta. Here's why. She is the only one with enough power to be able to stop the federal government right now. In Canada, there's federalism, which means that the Premier has just as much power as the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister does not have jurisdiction over the oil in Alberta. If Alberta left Canada today, it would be the fourth largest oil producer in the world as its own nation. Fourth in the world. Alberta pays 5 times more towards the federal government than the other two big players, British Columbia and Ontario. 5 times more. And so they are holding all of the cards. And Carney is going to have a very difficult time dealing with the constant threat of him losing an entire province should he start to enact his radical climate agenda, net zero by 2030. Premier Smith has already come out the very next day after the election and proposed Bill 54, which makes it much easier for citizens to start a referendum and for citizens to put forward petitions to leave the country.
Is the door still open to Alberta separating? I feel that question wasn't directly answered.
Well, not by me. I believe in Alberta's sovereignty within a united Canada. However, there is a citizen-initiated referendum process that if citizens want to put a question on a ballot and get enough of their fellow citizens to sign that petition, then those questions will be put forward. Again, I don't want to prejudge what a question might be, but not by our government.
Our government will not be putting a vote on separation from Canada on the referendum ballot. However, if there is a successful citizen-led referendum petition that is able to gather the requisite number of signatures requesting such a question to be put on a referendum, our government will respect the democratic process and include that question on the 2026 provincial referendum ballot as well.
Can you imagine that if on the Liberals' watch they lose a province, they lose Confederation, they're the party that's responsible for the breakup of Confederation, they'll never get elected again.
Alberta will no longer tolerate having our livelihoods threatened, our industries targeted, and our resources landlocked by Ottawa. We will not accept their reckless and dangerous policies that will harm our economy, stifle our energy industry, jeopardize the reliability of our electricity grid, and raise electricity prices for Albertans.
So she is already putting Carney in the defensive. She's already on offense. She is the last line of defense right now that we have in Canada. That is our hope right now until the government can hopefully get toppled within the next 18 to 24 months, and Pierre has another shot to win. In the meantime, we conservative commentators, political commentators, you don't even have to be conservative. It is our job to battle the narrative of the mainstream media to help bring awareness to these issues, because this is crunch time. This is a very important time now that we have to sway the minds of the Canadians who voted for Carney. And so we're going to keep fighting this thing. From where we are, I'm speaking on behalf of Canadian Conservatives right now. We're going to continue to fight this thing as best we can. We're going to hold out, and there are some red flags that if these things come to pass, I myself, I can't speak for anybody else, I would have no choice but to leave this country. One of those red flags is the online censorship bill, which they call online safety. You know, it's online safety. The same thing that it's called in Europe, the same thing that it's called in England, where police are coming to your door for things that are said online. Now, if this law passes, then police could be coming to my door. Excuse me, Mr. Promain, would you like to come out, please? You're going to jail because of your unacceptable views. I won't be living in a society like that, so I will fight tooth and nail to the last breath in my body. But if it passes, I got plan B. Move to Alberta, Alberta joins 51st state, I'm an American, or I just simply move to the States. That's the outlook, that's my reaction. That is my prediction for the future. I wanted to give you guys a sobering reality, and I wanted to give you a little bit of hope and reorient what we should be doing in this time.
What's up, brother? Just thought I'd check in on this gloomy and sad day for Canadians while I light one up and try to enjoy my coffee this morning. Hope you're doing okay. I was not earlier today. Stay strong, brother. Strength and honor.